Hi guys, tonight we're following the first humans who ever found honey, long before sugar bowls, glass jars, neat labels, or anyone pretending that raw wildflower blend makes breakfast spiritual. You are walking into a world where sweetness is almost impossible to find. No candy, no cake, no polite little biscuit beside your tea, just roots, berries, bitter leaves, smoked meat, rainwater, and then, suddenly, a golden treasure hidden inside a cliff. Imagine the air warm and green, insects murmuring in the leaves, smoke curling from a tiny fire, and somewhere above you, bees moving like sparks around a dark hole in the stone. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And while you're getting comfortable, comment where you're listening from and your local time, because somewhere on this planet, someone else is also drifting towards sleep with ancient bees in their ears. Now, dim the lights. You walk barefoot over cool earth, into a morning so old that no one has given it a name. The ground is damp beneath you. It presses softly between your toes, holding the chill of the night. Around you, the forest breathes. Leaves tremble with tiny sounds. Birds call from high branches, each note bright and brief, then fading into the larger hush. The air smells of crushed grass, wet bark, animal musk, and the faint ash of yesterday's fire. You're not a farmer, you do not own land, you do not measure time by months or years. You follow hunger, weather, memory, and the quiet instructions of the people beside you. Sweetness, in this world, is rare. Fruit comes only when the season allows it, and even then it may be sour, bruised, half-eaten by birds, or guarded by thorns. Certain roots offer starch, meat offers strength, nuts offer oil. But honey is different. Honey is brightness you can taste. It is sunlight stored in wax. It is the kind of food that makes even tired adults widen their eyes for a moment, as if the forest has whispered a secret directly onto the tongue. You first learn of it by watching movement. Not one bee. One bee is only a flicker, a little dark bead of a life crossing a beam of light, but many bees create a path. Your elders notice the line before you do. They pause beneath a tree, their heads tilted. A child points. Someone makes a low sound, not quite a word, more like a careful invitation to pay attention. You follow their gaze and see the traffic, bees leaving and returning, always with purpose, vanishing toward a broken trunk half hidden by vines. There is no written map for this. There is knowledge held in bodies, which flowers bloom after the heavy rains, which hollow trees may shelter a swarm, which cliffs are worth climbing, which stinging insects can be smoked away, and which should be left alone unless you enjoy spending the afternoon swollen and regretting your life choices. Very ancient people were not simple. They were alert, patient, observant, and deeply skilled at reading the living world. Their libraries were not shelves. Their libraries were tracks in mud, bird calls at dawn, smoke colour, cloud shape, and the sound of bees inside wood. You move closer. The hum grows thicker. It settles against your skin, more felt than heard, like a small vibration behind the ribs. Someone gathers dry leaves, bark curls, and punky wood that smoulders instead of flames. Smoke is coaxed into being, grey and soft. It smells sharp, resinous, a little bitter. The smoke lifts toward the hive entrance, and the bees become confused, slower, less organized. Not harmless, never harmless, but less certain. That is enough. A climber steps forward. Perhaps today it is you. Perhaps your hands are already marked with old scratches from bark and stone. You grip the trunk, feeling rough ridges press into your palms, your knees scrape, your shoulders tense, below. The group watches in silence, except for a baby fussing somewhere under a fur wrap and being gently bounced back into calm. Above, the honey waits. There is danger in this sweetness. Bees defend their home fiercely. A fall from even a modest tree can break a bone, and a broken bone in this age is not a minor inconvenience followed by a cast and sympathetic snacks. It can change everything. Still, the reward is powerful. Honey gives quick energy. Wax can be chewed, shaped, burned, carried. Larvae in the comb offer fat and protein, which sounds less dreamy than honey. Yes, but your Stone Age stomach is not here for branding. It is here for survival. When your fingers finally reach the comb, it is warm. That is the first surprise. Not cold like stone, not dry like old wood, but living warmth, held by thousands of tiny bodies. The wax gives under pressure. It tears with a soft, sticky resistance. Honey runs over your knuckles. It is thick, floral, wild, carrying the taste of whatever blossoms the bees have visited. It may taste of forest herbs, flowering shrubs, high meadow plants, or trees whose names have not yet been invented. You bring a finger to your mouth. For a moment, the world narrows. There is only sweetness. It spreads over your tongue, rich and golden, almost unbelievable. The forest still smells of smoke and damp leaves. Bees still tap against your skin. Someone below still whispers in warning. But your mind brightens. You understand, not with words, that this substance matters. It is food, pleasure, medicine, luck, and triumph all at once. A small, sticky miracle, stolen politely from creatures who absolutely did not approve the transaction. One of the clearest mainstream clues to this ancient relationship survives in rock art, in eastern Spain, at a place often called the Spider Cave. A prehistoric painting shows a human figure climbing toward a nest while bees swirl around. The image is thousands of years old, and it tells us something simple and profound. People were risking their bodies for honey long before cities rose, long before kings, long before anyone wrote down a recipe. You can picture that painted figure as a cousin of your own moment, a slender shape suspended between hunger and delight. Historians still argue whether such images show everyday gathering, ritual bravery, or some mixture of food collection and sacred meaning. That uncertainty is part of the charm. Maybe a honey hunt was just a practical task, like fetching water or collecting firewood. Or maybe it was also a performance, a test, a story told around embers. The person who climbed well might be praised. The person who found a hive might be lucky. The sweetness itself, arriving from winged creatures and hidden chambers, may have felt like a gift from a world just beyond human control. You descend slowly, one careful movement at a time. Your arm aches. Your hair smells of smoke. Bees still drift around you, irritated little guardians of the treasure. Someone takes the comb from your hand and wraps it in leaves. Someone else laughs softly when honey drips onto your wrist and you try to lick it without losing your grip. The group begins to move away, not running, not panicking, just easing back into the trees as the hive gathers itself behind you. Later, the honey is shared. This matters. In small foraging groups, food is not only calories, it is relationship. A piece of comb passes from hand to hand. Children receive a taste. Elders receive a portion. Hunters, gatherers, caretakers, and climbers all take part in the quiet ceremony of eating. No one needs a golden spoon. No one needs a ceramic bowl. The comb itself is the container, the waxy architecture of the bees, now broken open under human fingers. The sound of eating is gentle, a soft chew, a low murmur, a pleased exhale. Honey sticks to lips, teeth, fingertips, and probably to someone's hair, because humanity has never been graceful with sticky foods. The wax may be chewed until the sweetness fades. Bits of brood may be eaten too. Nothing is wasted if it can nourish the body. Around you, smoke from the fire curls upward into the evening air, carrying the scent of charred wood and roasted meat. The sky darkens to violet between branches. A quirky thread runs through this old story, especially in parts of Africa, where honey-guide birds are stoned to lead humans toward bee nests. The bird calls, the human follows, the hive is opened, and the bird may feast on wax and larvae left behind. Some researchers believe this partnership may have very ancient roots. Imagine that. Not a pet, not a farm animal, not a trained servant, but a wild bird and a human being negotiating through sound, movement, and appetite. Nature, apparently, had referral programs before civilization did. You rest near the fire and the day settles into your muscles. The sweetness is gone from your mouth now, but the memory of it remains. Honey is unusual that way. It lingers, not just as taste, but as an event. Everyone remembers where it came from. The leaning tree, the hollow trunk, the sting on someone's cheek, the child who laughed at the dripping comb, the dangerous climb, the smell of smoke. These details become story, and story becomes knowledge. Over time, you learn that honey changes with place and season. A hive near certain blossoms gives one flavour. A hive in another valley gives another. Some honey is pale and delicate, some is dark, heavy, almost smoky in its own right. Without chemistry, without glass jars, without charming little labels at farmer's market, you still understand terroir in your bones. You know that landscape speaks through sweetness. You may also notice that honey keeps strangely well. Other foods spoil quickly, meat rots, fruit collapses into sourness, leaves wilt, but honey resists decay. Its thickness, its low moisture, its natural acidity, all make it a difficult place for many tiny spoilers to thrive. You do not know the science, of course. You only know that honey can remain good when other foods fail. That alone makes it feel special, perhaps even uncanny. And so, in this nameless age, honey becomes more than a treat. It is a prize worth climbing for, a food worth remembering, a substance that gathers people together. It teaches you to look upward. It teaches you to follow small signs. It teaches you that the world hides sweetness in dangerous places, which is deeply inconvenient but also rather poetic. The night grows cooler. You pull a hide closer around your shoulders. The forest is no longer bright green, but layered in shadow. Somewhere beyond the firelight, bees are sealed into their hollow tree, repairing damage, warming their queen, carrying on with the ancient business of the hive. They do not know they have entered human history. They do not know that one day people will paint them, praise them, worship near them, trade their honey, study their dances, and worry over their survival. For now, they simply hum in the dark. You lie down on the ground, smelling smoke in your hair and honey on your skin. The stars above are sharp, countless, and silent. Your belly is fuller than it was. Your hands ache pleasantly. In the fading warmth of the fire, you understand the day not as a lesson, but as a feeling the rough bark under your palms, the tense climb, the golden comb breaking open, the sudden impossible sweetness. Humanity has found one of its first treasures, and it came not from stone, not from metal, not from conquest, but from flowers, wings, patience, and a little smoke drifting upward into the leaves. You wake into a different kind of morning, one shaped not only by wandering feet, but by walls, hearths, paths, and fields. The world around you still feels ancient and raw, but now there are signs of staying. Smoke rises from clustered huts. Dogs nose through scraps near the doorway. Clay pots sit upside down in the pale light, drying after a night of damp air. Somewhere nearby, grain heads brush softly against one another in the breeze, making a dry whisper that sounds almost like rain, though the sky is clear. You step out onto packed earth. It is cool at first, then warmer where the sun has touched it. The village smells of ash, stored grain, damp reeds, animal hides, and the sour, sweet breath of fermentation from a covered pot near the wall. People are already awake. Someone grinds seeds on a stone, the rhythm slow and steady. Someone else patches a woven basket. A child carries water in a small vessel with both hands, walking with the solemn focus of a tiny official. Life has not become easy. That would be adorable, and completely wrong. Farming brings food, yes, but also weeds, pests, bad harvests, sore backs, arguments over storage, and the exciting new human hobby of wondering whether the sky's about to ruin everything. Still, staying in one place changes how you see the world. You notice which trees bloom near your home. You notice where bees return year after year. You begin to think not only of finding honey, but of encouraging it to remain close. In this village, bees are still wild creatures. They do not belong to you in the way goats might, or dogs, or a field of barley. You cannot command a bee. You can barely persuade one not to sting you, and even that depends on luck, smoke, and whether you're moving like a calm person or like a frantic snack. But you can watch. You can learn. You can leave hollow logs undisturbed if a swarm settles inside. You can place sections of bark or bundles of reeds in places where bees might like to nest. You can begin, quietly and imperfectly, to live beside the hive. A mainstream fact sits beneath this scene in the early farming world. People were already using products from bees. Archaeologists have found traces of beeswax in ancient pottery from Neolithic communities, showing that honeycomb and wax were part of life thousands of years ago. These traces are not dramatic. They do not sing. They do not announce themselves with golden trumpets. They are faint chemical ghosts in clay, but they tell a very human story. Someone handled comb. Someone warmed wax. Someone placed something sweet, sticky, or useful into a vessel and left behind a memory too small for the eye. You follow an older woman toward the edge of the settlement, where huts give way to scrub, thorn, and flowering plants. Her hands are strong, cracked at the knuckles, smelling faintly of smoke and crushed leaves. She carries a shallow basket and twist of smouldering material that sends up a pale thread of smoke. You hear bees before you see them, a low, living chord near a clay-lined hollow set into a bank of earth. The place is not truly a hive built by human design. Not yet. It is more like an invitation that happened to be accepted. The bees move in and out of darkness. Their bodies flash in sunlight, then vanish. Around the entrance, the air feels busy, almost crowded. The old woman gestures for you to stay still. You obey because you are fond of having an unswollen face. She moves slowly, almost sleepily, letting smoke drift toward the entrance. The smell is dry and herbal. It catches in your throat, but not unpleasantly. Bees swirl, confused by the haze. They retreat deeper. Her fingers reach in and remove a small piece of comb. Not too much, just enough. This is the beginning of a long negotiation. Humans want honey. Bees want to continue being bees. The wise villager takes carefully, leaves enough behind, returns when flowers are plentiful, and remembers which colonies survive. It is not modern beekeeping. There are no wooden frames, no veils, no careful inspection boards, but there is attention. There is restraint. There is the first faint outline of management, shaped by hunger and patience. You carry the comb back toward the houses. It is wrapped in leaves, but honey still leaks through, warm against your palm. The smell rises gently, floral and earthy, mixed with smoke. Near the central hearth, the comb is placed in a small clay bowl. Children gather too close. Adults pretend not to be just as eager. A little honey is mixed into mashed grain. The result is thick, uneven, slightly smoky, and probably full of bits that would horrify a modern breakfast reviewer. To you, it is wonderful. Honey changes village food in small but meaningful ways. Grain porridge becomes softer and richer. Flatbread can be brushed with sweetness. Nuts and seeds can be bound together. Bitter herbs become easier to swallow. Fermented drinks can be nudged into new flavours. Even a little honey can turn a hard meal into a remembered meal. It is not everyday abundance. It is occasion, relief, and reward. Wax matters too. You rub a piece between your fingers and feel it soften with body heat. It smells warm, faintly sweet, animal and floral at once. Beeswax can help seal containers, coat cords, waterproof baskets, mend cracks, and perhaps shape small objects. In a world without plastic, rubber, tape, or the mysterious kitchen drawer full of things nobody can identify, wax is genuinely useful. It clings. It protects. It burns with a cleaner flame than many greasy fuels. It becomes one of those humble materials that make settled life just a little more possible. Historians still debate whether early villagers truly kept bees in planned hives, or mostly harvested from colonies that nested conveniently near human homes. The evidence is delicate because wood rots, reeds vanish, and mud structures return to earth without leaving neat labels. A hollow log used by bees might look like ordinary debris after thousands of years. A clay tube might be a hive, a storage object, or something else entirely. The past is generous with mysteries and very stingy with captions. You walk through the village in the late afternoon. The sun lowers, turning the walls amber. A goat complains from behind a fence with the tragic voice of a creature denied its preferred weed. Someone laughs. Someone coughs. A grinding stone continues its circular rasp. Near one doorway, honey is being stirred into a thick mixture with herbs. The scent is sharp, green, and sweet. It may be food. It may be a remedy. In many early communities, the line between nourishment and medicine is thin, a substance that soothes the throat, gives energy, and resists spoilage naturally earns trust. People begin to attach meanings to honey because humans cannot help doing that. A rare food becomes a blessed food. A golden liquid becomes a sign of favour. A hive, with its hidden order and fierce protection, becomes more than an insect home. It becomes an image of abundance. It may belong in offerings, in healing, in rites around birth, marriage, or death. Not every village leaves evidence of this, and not every sticky bowl is sacred. Sometimes a bowl is just a bowl, and sometimes it held a snack. Still, the possibility lingers. A quirky little tidbit appears in the way early people may have understood bees themselves. For a long time, many human societies struggled to explain how bees reproduced. The inside of a hive is dark, crowded, and not exactly designed for easy observation by a curious person, with no magnifying glass and limited patience for stings. Some ancient ideas later imagined bees emerging from flowers, from warmth, even from strange transformations of matter. It sounds odd now, but standing beside a humming wall of insects, watching them vanish into darkness and return dusted with pollen, you can understand how imagination filled the gaps. Even without perfect knowledge, villagers understand patterns. They notice that bees favour certain seasons. They see how flowering fields bring activity. They recognise that smoke changes behaviour. They may learn that a colony weakened too much does not recover. This knowledge is not written in manuals. It is carried by memory, by gesture, by the quiet correction of elders. A child reaches too fast and is pulled back. A young adult takes too much comb and is scolded. A successful harvest becomes instruction. As evening settles, you sit near a doorway where the wall still holds the day's warmth. Your back rests against clay plaster, slightly rough through your clothing. The air cools. Smoke from cooking fires lies low, blue and fragrant. Someone passes you a piece of bread touched with honey. It is chewy, grainy, and sweet only in places. You eat slowly. The sweetness is no longer just a wild surprise. It is entering the rhythm of a home, Around you, settled life gathers itself into night. Pots are covered. Tools are leaned against walls. Children grow heavy-eyed. The bees outside the village are quieting too, drawn inward by darkness and temperature, clustering around their hidden centre. Their labour has crossed into human hands, into bowls, into bellies, into stories, into the little repairs that hold containers together. They remain untamed, but not distant. They are neighbours now. Difficult neighbours. Yes, winged and irritable and heavily armed with stingers, but neighbours all the same. You close your eyes and listen. The village has a different silence from the forest. It is layered with breathing, embers, animals shifting, grain settling in storage pits, and the occasional murmur of someone speaking softly in the dark, nearby. A clay bowl still smells faintly of honey and herbs. The scent is delicate, almost lost beneath smoke and earth, yet it remains. In this young village, sweetness has found a place beside the hearth, and people have begun to shape their days around the small golden patience of bees. You stand beside the Nile in the thin blue light before sunrise, where the river moves with the calm confidence of something older than every palace built along its banks. The mud beneath your sandals is cool and slick. Reeds whisper against one another. Ibis birds step through the shallows with slow, delicate suspicion, as if judging the entire human project and finding it only partly organised. Beyond the water, fields stretch into the dawn, green with grain, stitched by canals, bordered by palms. The air smells of river silt, cattle, wet rope, baking clay, and smoke beginning to rise from the household fires. In this land, sweetness has become part of order. Egypt is a place of counting, storing, measuring, and offering. Grain is tallied, beer is brewed, linen is folded, stone is carved. The sun rises each day as if performing a royal duty. Honey, too, finds its place inside this immense rhythm. It is not just a lucky prize from a hidden nest. It is gathered, taxed, stored, offered, prescribed, and treasured. Even sweetness, naturally, must learn to behave in a bureaucracy. Ancient Egypt did not meet a useful substance without eventually giving someone a title, a seal, and a storage jar for it. You walk toward a row of hives near cultivated fields where flowers open under the warming sun. Some Egyptian hives were made as long horizontal cylinders of clay or mud, stacked or arranged as bees could enter from one end while beekeepers worked from the other. The clay feels dry and faintly gritty under your fingertips. When sunlight touches it, it releases the smell of baked earth. Around the hive mouths, bees thicken the air with motion, rising and settling in restless patterns. Their hum joins the sounds of irrigation water, distant workers calling, and a donkey expressing its opinions with impressive confidence. A beekeeper crouches nearby, his movements careful and unhurried. He uses smoke, as practical people have done for ages, and the smoke smells of straw and dung fuel, sharp but familiar in a countryside where nothing useful is wasted. He does not wear a white suit or veil. He trusts experience, timing, and a certain calm courage that may look peaceful only because panic would be ridiculous. He opens the rear of a hive and reaches inside for comb. Bees spill out in a shimmering cloud, and you feel the nervous prickle of them passing near your face. The honey that emerges is thick and dark gold. It clings to the comb in glossy pockets when it is pressed or drained. It flows slowly into a vessel, carrying scents from Egyptian flowers, riverbank plants, orchards, and fields. In a land where ordinary diets rely heavily on bread, beer, onions, fish, dates, and legumes, honey offers a concentrated luxury. It sweetens cakes and breads. It enriches sauces. It may be stirred into wine or beer for special occasions. It can make the ordinary feel touched by ceremony. A mainstream historical fact is easy to hold here. Ancient Egyptians used honey in food, medicine, religious offerings, and burial practice. Medical writings describe honey in treatments for wounds, eye conditions, stomach troubles, and skin complaints. The Egyptians may not have known about bacteria in the modern sense, but they recognized results. Honey soothed, protected, and preserved. It was sticky, yes, which is not always elegant, but history has never required medicine to be glamorous. You enter a house where a woman prepares a small honey cake. The room is dim and warm. Light falls through the doorway in a bright rectangle. A grinding stone rests near the wall, dusted with flour. She mixes grain meal with fat, dates, and honey, working the dough with hands that shine slightly from oil. The smell is comforting toasted flour, sweetness, smoke, and warm clay. A child watches with enormous seriousness, the ancient expression of someone waiting for dessert while pretending to help. Outside, a potter calls to a neighbour. Somewhere, a goat knocks something over and creates a tiny household crisis. Honey belongs to temples as much as kitchens. You pass through a gateway into a sacred precinct where stone columns rise like papyrus stalks. The air changes. It is cooler in the shade, scented with incense, oil, flowers, and the mineral breath of carved stone. Priests move quietly in linen. Offerings are arranged with care bread, beer, fruit, meat, flowers, milk, and jars of honey. To offer honey is to present concentrated abundance, the sweetness of fields transformed by bees into a substance worthy of gods. A jar sealed with clay is more than food. It is devotion with a lid. In Egyptian royal language, the bee itself carries weight. One of the king's titles joined the sedge and the bee, symbols associated with Upper and Lower Egypt. The bee stood for the northern land, tied to the delta, marshes, fertility, and royal identity. This is a wonderfully specific bit of ancient symbolism. Imagine being an insect and somehow ending up in a king's official title. Bees did not ask for politics, yet there they are, buzzing quietly inside the language of power. A quirky tidbit drifts through Egyptian history like a gold fleck in river mud. Honey was sometimes connected with protection so strongly that it appears in magical and healing formulas, not merely recipes. In certain charms, mixtures using honey could be part of spoken rituals, remedies, or acts meant to guard the body. To modern ears, that may sound like medicine wearing a ceremonial hat, but in Egypt, healing often belonged to both practical treatment and sacred speech. You did not have to choose between the herb, the bandage, the god, and the sweetener. You might sensibly invite all of them. You move deeper into a temple storehouse. It is shadowy, cool, and orderly. Clay jars stand in rows, their sealed tops marked or tied. The floor feels hard beneath your feet. Dust softens every edge. Here, honey becomes administration. It can be collected as tax or tribute, distributed to workers, reserved for rituals, sent to officials, or stored among costly goods. Because it travels well and resists quick spoilage, it suits a world of boats, granaries, scribes, and long-distance control. A scribe marks quantities with reed pen and ink, creating little signs that turn sweetness into accounting. Very relaxing, naturally. Unless you're the person being audited by a man in linen with excellent handwriting. Historians still argue whether Egyptian beekeeping was centrally organised from early periods across large estates, or whether many local households and regional workers kept bees in smaller, less visible ways. Temple scenes and administrative records show beekeeping clearly, but they preserve elite views of life. The quiet work of ordinary people is harder to catch. A grand carving may show state control, while an unmarked clay hive near a village may vanish into dust. The past keeps some doors open, and others only half open, letting you feel the breeze without seeing the room. You travel along the river in a low boat with jars tucked safely near the centre. The Nile smells of wet plants, fish, mud, and sun-warmed wood. Sailcloth snaps gently above you. The water slaps the hull with a patient rhythm. Honey can move this way, carried from rural areas toward temples, palaces, and towns. Bees gather sweetness from many small blossoms. Then humans gather honey into jars. Then boats gather jars into commerce. It is a chain of quiet labour. Wing to comb, comb to hand, hand to vessel, vessel to river. At a worksite near a royal project, honey appears in another roll ration and refreshment. You may see workers eating bread with a touch of sweetness, or honey used in a medicinal mixture for cracked skin and cuts. The sun is harsh. Stone dust dries the mouth. Linen sticks to the back. In such a place, even a little honey can feel generous. It gives quick energy and a brief lift to the spirit. No one becomes less tired forever from one sweet bite. But for a moment, the body says yes, and that matters. Then you enter the quiet world of tombs. Not a place of terror, not here, but of preparation. The Egyptians imagined death as a journey requiring care, goods, words, and protection. Honey could be placed among provisions for the next life. It could also be used in preservation and ritual contexts, valued for its resistance to decay and its association with purity and abundance. The chamber smells of resin, linen, dry stone, cedar, and dust. Lamps flicker. Painted walls glow in red, yellow, black, and blue. Offerings are arranged as if the dead might wake into a well-stocked household and politely expect breakfast. Honey's preserving quality encouraged wonder. Much later, people would love to repeat tales of ancient honey found in tombs still somehow edible. Such stories are often told with more enthusiasm than evidence, which is very human. The idea is irresistible: a sealed jar, a vanished kingdom, a spoonful of sweetness outliving empires. Whether every version is true matters less than what the legend reveals. Honey feels ancient even when fresh. It seems to carry time inside itself. Night settles over the Nile Valley. The fields cool. Frogs begin their small wet songs. Palm leaves rustle overhead. In a courtyard, a jar of honey catches lamplight and glows like a captured piece of sunset. You sit with your back against a plastered wall, feeling the warmth of the day slowly leave the mud brick. Somewhere nearby, bees sleep in clay hives, their crowded bodies keeping the colony alive through darkness. Farther away, priests close storerooms, scribes put away their pallets, families finish their evening meals, and the river keeps moving under the stars. You taste a final drop from your finger. It is thick, floral, and slightly smoky from the room around you. In Egypt, honey has become sweetness with 1,000 duties. It feeds the living, honours the gods, comforts the sick, travels by boat, marks royal symbolism, rests in tombs, and shines inside the practical imagination of a civilization built on mud, sun, water, and astonishing patience. The bees hum beyond the walls, unseen but essential, turning blossoms into treasure while the great river carries the night gently northward. You step onto a Greek hillside in the clear brightness of morning, where the stones hold a little coolness from the night, and the sun climbs slowly over silver-green olive trees. The path under your sandals is dusty and uneven. Wild thyme grows low between rocks, releasing its sharp fragrance when your foot brushes it. Somewhere nearby, goats move through scrub with bells clinking at their throats, sounding less like a noble pastoral scene and more like a tiny committee of metal cups having opinions. The air is dry, resinous, and alive with insects. Bees work among thyme, sage, oregano, rock rose, and pale blossoms clinging to the slopes. Their hum rises and falls with the breeze, soft enough to soothe you, steady enough to feel almost like breath. You pause beside a low stone wall and look across the land. The sea glitters in the distance. The sky is enormous and blue. Around you, honey is not merely a pleasant food, It belongs to gods, healers, poets, athletes, and ordinary households where people are trying, as always, to make life taste a little kinder. In the Greek world, honey is the chief sweetener for many centuries. Cane sugar is not part of daily life here. Sweetness comes from fruit, grape syrup, and above all honey. The best local varieties are praised with a kind of seriousness people still reserve for wine, cheese, coffee, and other items that allow civilized disagreement. Honey from thyme-covered slopes becomes famous, especially in Attica, where the honey of Mount Hymettus gains a lasting reputation for fragrance and quality. You can almost taste why. The land itself is aromatic. The plants are small, tough, and intense. The bees gather a landscape that smells like sun on herbs. You approach a group of hives near a rural house. They may be made from clay cylinders, woven baskets, cork, hollow logs, or other regional materials depending on place and period. The beekeeper moves with practiced caution. He carries smoke and a simple tool, and his tunic smells of wool, sweat, ash, and crushed herbs. He lifts part of a hive with slow hands. Bees spill into the light in a vibrating veil. You feel the touch of one against your wrist, light as a falling seed, then gone. Your body wants to flinch. Your dignity asks your body not to embarrass itself. The comb appears, pale wax filled with gold. Honey drips into a shallow bowl, thick and shining. It tastes floral, herbal, slightly warm from the hive, and almost spicy at the edge. This is not the smooth, anonymous sweetness of a modern squeeze bottle. It is local, seasonal, moody, and probably quite pleased with itself. A spoonful carries hillside, blossom, weather, and bee labour altogether. A mainstream historical fact sits clearly in this scene. Greek physicians, including writers in the Hippocratic tradition, used honey in medical preparations. Honey appears in mixtures for wounds, coughs, digestive complaints, and general nourishment. It might be blended with water as hydromel, mixed with vinegar as oxymel, or added to medicines to make bitter ingredients less offensive. This last purpose should not be underestimated. Humanity has spent thousands of years discovering useful plants that taste like punishment, and honey has spent thousands of years making them slightly less rude. You enter a modest healing room near a sanctuary. The floor is swept hard earth. A lamp burns with a small trembling flame. Shelves hold jars, bundles of dried herbs, linen strips, oil, vinegar, wine, and honey sealed in clay. The room smells of beeswax, olive oil, bitter roots, and clean wool. A patient sits on a low stool, coughing into the crook of his arm while trying to look less miserable than he feels. A healer warms a mixture with honey, herbs, and liquid, stirring until the scent grows sweet and medicinal. The spoon touches the rim with a soft tap, tap, tap. Greek medicine is not one thing. It ranges from temple healing to household remedies, from philosophical theories of balance to very practical wound care. Honey fits comfortably into all of it. It can coat the throat, preserve ingredients, and cover damaged skin. Its stickiness is a nuisance. Yes, but also part of its gift. It clings where it is placed, in a world of dust, sweat, open sandals, and blades not cleaned by modern standards. That matters. Then the scene shifts into myth, because the Greeks rarely leave a useful substance alone without inviting a god to hover nearby. Honey belongs in stories of divine childhood and sacred nourishment. You hear of Zeus hidden as an infant in a cave on Crete, protected from his devouring father and fed by nymphs, sometimes associated with the goat Amalthea and with bees. The details vary, as myths like to do. Myth is not a spreadsheet. It is a living river of versions, each one polished by singers, places, families, and cults. You walk into a cave where cool air touches your arms. Water drips somewhere in the darkness. The stone smells mineral and damp. Outside, the world is bright, but inside, sound softens. Imagine bees at the entrance, moving between sunlight and shadow, carrying sweetness to a hidden child who will become king of the gods. It is a strange, tender image the future Thunderer nourished by small winged workers. Power apparently begins with being fed properly, which every sleepy person understands. Honey also appears in poetry. It becomes a metaphor for eloquence, persuasion, and inspired speech. Sweet words are honeyed words. A good poet does not merely speak, he pours sweetness into the ear. You sit in the shade of a portico while a singer recites. His voice rises and falls, accompanied by the faint pluck of strings. Listeners lean in. Nearby, a vendor sells sesame cakes bound with honey, and the roasted scent curls through the air. Language, music, and food mingle until the comparison feels natural. Some speech really can feel like honey, especially if you are tired and the speaker knows when to stop. At a festival, eggs. Honey moves through the crowd in more earthly forms. You taste small cakes fried or baked, glazed with honey, sprinkled with sesame or nuts. They are crisp at the edge, soft within, sweet enough to make a child quiet for exactly 3 seconds, which is almost miraculous. Wine is diluted with water, as Greeks generally prefer, and sometimes sweetness finds its way into drinks. Athletes may eat honey cakes for energy. Travellers carry food strengthened by honey. Families offer it at household shrines. The sweetness crosses boundaries between sacred and practical without asking permission. A quirky tidbit comes from the Greek word melissa, meaning bee. In some religious settings, priestesses could be called melissae, bees, especially in connection with goddesses such as Demeter or Artemis in certain traditions. Imagine priestesses named for bees, moving through ritual space like attendants of sweetness, fertility, and hidden order. It sounds fanciful, but it reveals something real about Greek imagination. Bees were not just insects. They suggested purity, industry, feminine power, prophecy, and the mysterious organization of life inside the hive. Historians still argue whether Greek divine foods like ambrosia and nectar were ever imagined as forms of honey wine, or something more abstract and purely supernatural. The words shift across poems and traditions. Sometimes nectar seems drinkable. Sometimes ambrosia seems edible or fragrant. Sometimes they are less like menu items and more like symbols of immortality itself. You can understand the debate. Honey glows, resists decay, and tastes unlike common foods. For people searching for the flavour of deathlessness, it would be an obvious suspect. You wander now toward a philosopher's garden, where bees move through flowers while men debate the nature of animals, souls, politics, and probably lunch. Greek thinkers observed bees closely, although not always accurately. Aristotle wrote about bees with remarkable attention, noting their social life, work habits, and products. But he also inherited and repeated puzzling ideas about their reproduction. Without modern instruments, the queen's role was difficult to understand, and the hidden mating life of bees remained obscure. The hive revealed order, but not all its secrets. That uncertainty made bees perfect for speculation. Are they ruled by a king, as many ancients thought, or by something stranger? How do they choose their leader? Why do they labour so intensely? Are they models for citizens, households, soldiers, or priests? You hear these questions murmured in shaded courtyards and formal writings. The bee becomes a tiny political philosopher, whether she likes it or not, and if bees could roll their eyes, one suspects they would do so while continuing to outperform everyone in the room. You sit at a table as evening approaches. A clay lamp is lit. Its flame glows through the dimness, fed perhaps by oil, while nearby a beeswax votive gives off a faint, clean scent. Bread is broken. Cheese is passed. Olives shine in a bowl. Honey is drizzled over thick yogurt-like curds or fresh cheese, then scattered with nuts. The spoon pulls a shining thread from the jar. The taste is simple and complete, salty, creamy, sweet, and fragrant with hillside flowers. Outside, the village settles into night. Cicadas quiet. Dogs bark once, then reconsider. The sea wind moves through olive branches with a dry silver rustle. In the distance, someone sings a fragment of a song, and the melody fades before you can grasp it. Bees return to their hives, each one carrying a tiny cargo from the day's blossoms. Their labour will sweeten medicine, ritual, poetry, supper, and myth. You breathe in the air of time and cooling stone. Greek honey is not only food in your mouth, it is a bridge between body and imagination. It comforts the sick, feeds the strong, flavours offerings, glows in stories of gods, and gives poets a language for beauty itself. In this hillside world, sweetness becomes thought, healing, devotion, and art, all gathered patiently by small creatures moving through sunlight. You arrive in Rome through noise first. Not a single grand trumpet blast, not the clean marble silence that paintings like to promise, but wheels grinding over stone, sandals slapping pavement, vendors calling from stalls, donkeys snorting, water splashing from fountains, and someone nearby arguing with theatrical commitment over the price of fish. The city is awake, crowded, smoky, and astonishingly alive. Warm air moves through narrow streets carrying the smell of bread ovens, olive oil, damp wool, wine, sewage, incense, frying food, and crushed herbs underfoot. You step carefully around puddles and mule droppings, because empire may be majestic. But sidewalks remain a deeply personal challenge. Above you, laundry hangs from upper floors. Below you, shopkeepers open shutters. A baker pulls round loaves from an oven with a long paddle, and the crusty smell rolls into the street like a blessing. Beside the bread, in a smaller pot, honey warms gently until it loosens and shines. It is not rare in the way it once was, not beyond reach like treasure in a hidden cliff. Yet it is still valuable, still measured, still worth protecting from ants, thieves, and overly enthusiastic children. Rome runs on appetite. Grain arrives by ship. Olive oil travels in amphorae. Garum, that famous fermented fish sauce, perfumes kitchens with a confidence that modern noses might call ambitious. Wine flows everywhere, diluted for daily drinking, spiced for parties, traded across the sea, and honey moves through this world as a practical luxury. It sweetens, preserves, perfumes, heals, and helps turn ordinary ingredients into something the diner may praise loudly enough to impress the host. A clear historical fact rests here. Romans used honey widely in cooking, medicine, cosmetics, and drink, especially in malsum, a wine mixed with honey often served before meals. At a wealthy dinner, you may be offered a cup at the start, golden and fragrant, the sweetness softening the bite of wine. The cup is cool in your hand. The liquid smells floral, sharp, and slightly resinous. You sip, and for a moment the noisy city withdraws. Then someone reclines too dramatically on a dining couch, and Rome returns in full personality. You enter a kitchen in a comfortable household, where enslaved cooks work near a charcoal brazier. The floor is warm beneath your sandals, copper vessels catch the firelight. Mortars thud as herbs are pounded with pepper, cumin, coriander, rue, mint, and lovage. Honey waits in a ceramic jar, thick and amber, its rim sticky from use. A cook spoons it into a sauce with vinegar and garum, creating a flavour that is sweet, sour, salty, and pungent all at once. Roman taste often enjoys contrasts. Modern dessert logic does not rule here. Honey may sit beside fish sauce without apology, because the Roman palate is busy and apparently fearless. You taste a bit of the sauce on bread. It is intense, strange, and not unpleasant once your expectations stop panicking. Sweetness does not merely decorate food. It balances acid and salt. It rounds bitterness. It glosses roasted meats. It helps preserve fruits, honeyed dates, honey cakes, nuts coated in honey, pears cooked with wine and spices, all belong to the Roman table. Some recipes in elite collections call for honey with a generosity that makes you wonder whether the cook was feeding guests or trying to quiet them into admiration. In a market, honey becomes business. You walk among stalls shaded with awnings, hearing coins clink, baskets creak, and animals complain. Clay jars stand in rows, some sealed, some open for inspection. A seller lifts a lid and lets you smell. This honey is darker, perhaps from woodland blossoms. Another is paler and lighter. Some may be local. Some may have travelled from rural estates, islands, or provinces where bees work among different flowers. Rome collects landscapes in jars, then sells them to anyone with enough coins and optimism. The merchant dips a stick and lets honey fall in a slow thread. You notice its thickness, its colour, its scent. Buyers judge quality by taste, origin, clarity, and trust. Though trust in a marketplace is always a delicate sport. Adulteration is possible, so is exaggeration. A seller may praise his honey as if bees personally blessed it while singing hymns. You listen politely, because commerce has always included a little theatre. Beyond the city, you visit a villa estate where the pace is slower, though not exactly peaceful for the people doing the labour. Fields ripple in the wind. Fig trees spread broad leaves. Vines climb supports. In a sheltered place near orchards and herbs, hives are kept under the eye of a beekeeper. Roman agricultural writers discuss bees with practical attention, describing hive placement, swarming, feeding, and the importance of flowers. They know bees are profitable. They know wax matters. They know a good apiary can add sweetness and income to an estate. You walk close enough to hear the hives pulsing. The sound is thick and drowsy, like a spinning wheel made of the wings. The air smells of time, dust, warm wood, and distant manure. The hives may be made of bark, wicker, clay, or hollowed material. A keeper checks them with smoke, moving slowly while bees cloud around his hands. The sun lies hot on your shoulders. A bee lands on your sleeve, cleans its forelegs with tiny seriousness, then lifts away. There is dignity in that little movement, and also the faint impression that she has no patience for human empires. Wax from these hives travels another road through Roman life. It seals writing tablets, lines containers, shapes small figures, and becomes candles for those who can afford them. You hold a wax tablet in your hand and feel the surface give beneath a stylus. Words can be scratched, smoothed, and rewritten. Lists, accounts, school exercises, letters, insults, and love notes may all pass over wax. The bees, without meaning to, help Rome remember and forget. Honey also belongs to medicine. You enter a healer's shop where dried plants hang from rafters and jars crowd the shelves. The room smells of fennel, vinegar, wine, stale smoke, and something bitter enough to feel educational. Honey is mixed with herbs, used in wound dressings, stirred into syrups, and given as a vehicle for unpleasant powders. Roman medical writers value it for cleansing, soothing, and preserving. You watch a mixture being spread on linen. It glistens in lamplight, sticky and golden against the plain cloth. Cosmetics claim honey too. In a wealthy house, a woman has honey blended into a skin preparation with oils or other ingredients. The paste smells sweet, fatty, and floral. It cools as it touches the skin. Roman beauty routines can be elaborate, expensive, and occasionally alarming, because history's pursuit of smooth skin has never been entirely reasonable. Honey, at least, is one of the gentler participants. It softens, scents, and flatters. It also attracts flies if handled carelessly, which is one of nature's ways of keeping vanity humble. A quirky Roman tidbit waits at the dinner table, where elite taste sometimes wanders into the wonderfully odd. Romans famously raised edible dormice in special containers called gleraria, fattening them for the table. Some descriptions pair these little delicacies with honey and poppy seeds. It is a detail that tends to make modern listeners pause, blink, and perhaps become suddenly grateful for toast. Yet to a wealthy Roman host, such a dish could show refinement, novelty, and command over luxury. Nothing says dinner party like serving a sleepy rodent with a glaze. Apparently, scholars continue to debate how common beekeeping really was among ordinary Romans compared with large estates and specialized rural producers. Agricultural manuals preserve elite advice, and literary sources often speak from the viewpoint of people with property. The city poor, small farmers, and local sellers are harder to see clearly. Honey appears everywhere in texts, but texts do not always tell you who could afford how much, how often, or in what quality. The jar on a rich table and the spoon in a poor kitchen may belong to the same economy, but not the same experience. You move into a dining room at night, lamps burn along the walls, their flames tremble in draughts, gilding painted plaster and polished cups. Guests recline on couches, talking, laughing, boasting, correcting one another, and proving that even 2,000 years ago, a dinner conversation could become a competitive sport. Dishes arrive in sequence. Honey slips into many of them, sometimes obvious, sometimes hidden. A glazed piece of meat, a spiced wine, a fruit preserve, a cake offered with nuts. Sweetness keeps returning like a charming guest who knows everyone. Outside, Rome's trade routes stretch across land and sea. Honey and wax may travel in amphora, jars, baskets, and wrapped combs. Bees themselves remain local workers, but their products join the wider web of empire. A jar can move from countryside to town, from estate to port, from ship to warehouse, from merchant to household. You hear the creak of ropes on a dock, the splash of harbour water, the shouts of labourers unloading cargo. The smell there is salt, tar, fish, wet wood, and hot stone. Somewhere among olive oil, wine, grain, and spices, sweetness is being counted. Rome makes honey busy. It does not leave the golden substance resting quietly in a sacred bowl. It sends it into recipes, tax records, farm manuals, medical shelves, cosmetic pots, market stalls, and banquet jokes. Honey becomes part of movement, status, skill, and taste. It is not merely a gift from bees. It is a commodity shaped by roads, ships, labour, land ownership, household desire, and the Roman talent for turning nearly everything into administration and appetite. Late in the evening, you step away from the crowded dining room into a courtyard. The stones are cool now. A small fountain murmurs in the dark. The scent of honeyed wine still clings to your breath, mixed with herbs and smoke from the lamps. Above the roofline, stars show faintly through the city haze. Somewhere beyond the walls, hives rest among orchards and fields, their workers gathered into the warm privacy of wax. Rome roars, trades, feasts, heals, boasts, and calculates, while bees continue their patient labour, flower by flower, making a sweetness that even empire must receive one drop at a time. You enter a quiet courtyard at dawn, where the stones are still cool and the first light rests softly on bowls, jars, and folded cloth. The air is scented with smoke, milk, flowers, and something sweet held in a small vessel near the centre of the space. You hear sandals on stone, a low voice reciting words of blessing, a bird calling from a roof beam, and the faint, almost private sound of bees working somewhere beyond the wall. Honey has crossed into the realm of meaning, or it is still food, still medicine, still trade, still sticky enough to make fingers shine in the most undignified way. But in sacred traditions, it becomes more than a pleasant taste. It becomes promise. It becomes wisdom. It becomes a symbol of speech, healing, purity, abundance, and the generous order of the living world. People look at honey and see not only flowers transformed by bees, but a message from creation itself. Sweetness can be gathered from labour, patience, and fragile wings. You stand now in the world of ancient Israelite imagination, where honey appears in one of the most famous phrases in religious history, a land flowing with milk and honey. The phrase evokes fertility, richness, and divine promise. You can feel why it works. Milk is nourishment from the herd. Honey is sweetness from the land. Together they create an image of a place where the earth does not merely keep people alive, but welcomes them. It is not a technical farming report. It is longing made edible. A mainstream historical fact sits clearly here. Honey is mentioned many times in the Hebrew Bible, often as a sign of abundance, value, and delight. It appears in stories, laws, poetry, and descriptions of desirable land. Honey can be eaten, offered, found in wild places, or used as a metaphor for pleasant words. You imagine a family at a low table, dipping bread or fruit into a small dish of sweetness, while oil lamps burn nearby. The room smells of wool, clay, smoke, and warm grain. Outside, night insects pulse in the darkness, yet even this famous sweetness holds uncertainty. Historians still argue whether some ancient references to honey mean bee honey, date syrup, or a broader category of sweet liquid. In lands where date palms thrive, thick syrup made from dates could be common and deeply loved. Bee honey certainly existed, but language is slippery, especially when it flows across centuries. So when you hear milk and honey, you may be hearing bees, dates, or a shimmering blend of agricultural richness. The mystery does not weaken the phrase. It makes it more alive. You move into a Jewish household preparing for a new year. The table is clean, apples are sliced, honey gleams in a small bowl, catching candlelight in its golden surface. A hand dips apple into honey, and the fruit comes away shining. The wish is simple and beautiful, may the year be sweet. The taste is crisp, floral, bright. Around the table, voices soften. Children lean forward with the serious concentration that appears whenever sweetness is nearby. The ritual is gentle, domestic, and memorable. Time itself is being blessed through taste. Now you walk into an early Christian world of baptisms, feasts, deserts, monasteries, and church lamps. Honey belongs here too, sometimes through scripture, sometimes through symbol, sometimes through the ordinary fact that people still need sweetener and medicine. The promised land remains a powerful image. The words of scripture are compared to honey. Saints and preachers become associated with honeyed speech. In churches, beeswax candles burn with a steady flame, giving off a clean, faintly sweet fragrance quite different from smoky animal fat lamps. The light feels calmer, almost disciplined. You enter a dim basilica. Your footsteps sound soft against stone. The air is cool and carries the scent of wax, incense, damp plaster, and human breath. Candles flicker before painted images. Their flames lean gently when the door opens. Beeswax matters because it burns brightly and with less smoke than many alternatives, making it prized for worship. A candle is not just a practical light. It becomes a visible prayer, a small offering of brightness made from the hidden labour of bees. A quirky sacred tidbit drifts toward you from Christian legend St. Ambrose, whose name itself is tied to sweetness and immortality, was said in later tradition to have had a swarm of bees settle on his face as an infant without harming him, leaving behind a sign that his speech would one day be honeyed. It is the kind of story that sounds alarming for the baby and excellent for symbolism. Whether or not the event happened, the legend reveals a deep association between bees, eloquence, holiness, and divine favour. You find that same pattern of sweetness and wisdom in Islamic tradition. Honey appears in the Quran as something produced by bees, with healing for people. The bee is not treated as a random insect. Its work becomes a sign worth contemplating. You imagine a courtyard in the warm afternoon, white walls holding the heat, the scent of dust, mint tea, leather, and distant cooking fires. Someone pours honey into warm water or drizzles it over bread. A low recitation moves through the air like a thread. Sweetness becomes a reminder that the natural world is filled with signs for those who pay attention. In Islamic medicine, especially across the broad world shaped by Arabic, Persian, and other scholarly traditions, honey is valued in remedies, diet, and healing. Physicians discuss it in relation to digestion, wounds, and balance. It appears in syrups and compounds. Honey is practical, but also charged with meaning because scripture itself gives it dignity. You hold a cup warmed between your palms, honey dissolved into liquid with herbs. The taste is soothing and bright. The cup smells of sweetness, steam, and crushed leaves. Then the path opens into South Asia, where honey enters Hindu ritual and story with deep resonance. In many Hindu practices, honey is one of the 5 substances in Panchamrita, a sacred mixture often made with milk, yogurt, ghee, honey, and sugar. It may be used in ritual bathing of deities and then received as blessed food. Each ingredient brings its own texture and meaning nourishment, richness, sweetness, purity, and auspiciousness. You stand in a temple where bells ring, conch shells sound, and flowers lie in bright heaps near the altar. The air is thick with incense, sandalwood, oil lamps, and marigolds. A priest pours the mixture slowly over a sacred image. The liquid glides across stone or metal, catching light as it falls. Honey gives the mixture its golden thread. It clings, shines, and perfumes the offering. Around you, worshippers press their hands together. The floor is smooth and cool beneath bare feet. Bells vibrate through your chest. Later, a small spoonful of blessed sweetness touches your palm. It is creamy, fragrant, and faintly sticky. You taste it with reverence and, because you're human, with a small private delight. Honey also appears in ancient Indian medical traditions such as Ayurveda, where it is used in mixtures, as a carrier for herbs, and as a substance with particular qualities depending on preparation and age. These systems are rich, detailed, and sometimes debated, blending observation, philosophy, and ritual culture. Honey can carry medicine into the body, make strong flavours bearable, and symbolise the sweetness of balance. You see a healer measuring a dark spoonful into a bowl of powdered herbs. The smell is earthy, bitter, and sweet, a reminder that healing is often a negotiation between comfort and discipline. You continue toward Buddhist stories, where honey takes a tender and unusual role. One beloved tale tells of a monkey offering honey to the Buddha. The image is gentle and slightly strange, a wild creature bringing sweetness to an awakened teacher. In some versions, the monkey is overjoyed when the gift is accepted. The story carries humility, generosity, and devotion, not through gold or jewels, but through food gathered from the forest. You stand under broad leaves after rain, the air wet and green, hearing drops fall from branch to branch. A monkey watches from above with bright eyes. Somewhere nearby, bees move through blossoms. In Buddhist monastic settings, honey also belongs to rules about food and medicine. Monks living with strict discipline may receive certain medicinal substances, including honey, under particular conditions. The sweetness is not simply indulgence, it is nourishment, care, and support for fragile bodies walking a demanding path. You imagine a quiet monastery at dusk. Robes rustle, bowls are washed. A small amount of honey is placed aside with attention rather than greed. The atmosphere is spare but not cold. The smell of wet earth, old wood, and a fading lamp fills the air. Across these traditions, honey becomes a language. It speaks of promised land, blessed years, eloquent saints, divine signs, sacred mixtures, healing remedies, and humble offerings. It moves easily between scripture and kitchen, between altar and sickbed. That ease is part of its power. Honey does not need to choose between body and spirit. It nourishes both, or at least invites people to imagine that it can. You sit now in a garden between worlds, where evening gathers slowly. The plants are darkening. Bees return to their hives with the last of the light. From different houses and temples, you hear fragments of blessing, a bell, a chant, a recitation, a whispered prayer. The scents mingle: wax, incense, bread, herbs, flowers, milk, and smoke. A small spoon rests beside a bowl of honey, and the surface gleams even as the air grows dim. You touch the rim of the bowl. It is smooth, cool, and slightly sticky. That small stickiness is wonderfully honest. Sacred symbols may soar, but honey always reminds you that holiness often comes with fingerprints. People have lifted this sweetness toward gods, offered it to teachers, stirred it into medicine, and placed it on the tongues of children beginning a hopeful year. Bees do not preach, they gather. And from their gathering, human beings have made metaphors for promise, speech, healing, devotion, wisdom, and peace. The night settles softly. Somewhere, a candle made from beeswax burns with a quiet golden flame. Somewhere else, a family shares apples and honey. A monk receives a healing spoonful. A priest washes a sacred image, and a listener hears words compared to sweetness. You breathe in the calm air and feel how one humble substance has entered so many sacred rooms. Not loudly, not proudly, but with a gentle glow. Honey remains what it has always been: sunlight changed by flowers, carried by bees, and received by human hands with wonder. You enter a medieval abbey garden in the soft grey hour of early morning, when mist still clings to the ground and the stones seem to breathe out the cold of the night. Your shoes darken with dew as you step along a narrow path bordered by sage, rue, lavender, fennel, and low beds of onions. The air smells of wet earth, herbs, straw, smoke from the kitchen hearth, and the faint animal warmth of a stable wall. Somewhere beyond the cloister, a bell rings slowly, one note at a time, spreading through the quiet like ripples across dark water. Bees are already awake. Their sound rises from the far side of the garden, not loud, not urgent, but steady, a soft working murmur among the fruit trees. You follow it past a wall mottled with moss and lichen, past rows of cabbages and medicinal plants, to a sheltered corner where straw skeps sit beneath a little roof. They look like rounded baskets turned upside down, humble and patient, each one holding a hidden city of wings. The straw feels rough under your fingertips, dry on the outside, faintly warm where life gathers within. In this medieval world, the hive is part of the household of usefulness. Honey sweetens food in a time when sugar is costly and uncommon for many people. Wax gives clean light to churches and wealthy homes. Mead warms feast tables, market days, and long evenings when rain taps on shutters. Bees are small, but their products fit into nearly every corner of a life prayer: cooking, healing, rent, craft, celebration, and the slow business of surviving another winter without making too much dramatic eye contact with the turnip pot. A monk approaches in a dark wool habit, the hem damp from the grass. He carries a small smoking bundle and a knife. His face is lined, his hands broad and practical. Monasteries are places of prayer, yes, but also of brewing, planting, copying, repairing, storing, and counting. Holiness, it turns out, has chores. The monk bends near a skep and listens. His ear almost touches the straw. He is judging strength by sound, the fullness of the colony by its hum, the season by the bees moving at the entrance. A well-known medieval fact rests quietly here. Many monasteries kept bees because beeswax was highly valued for candles used in worship. Wax candles burned with a clearer, sweeter, less smoky flame than cheaper lights made from animal fat. In a stone church at night, that mattered. A clean flame could turn darkness into devotion. Honey might fill the stomach, but wax lifted light toward the altar. You step into the abbey church as the morning office begins. The floor is cold through the soles of your shoes, breath clouds faintly in the air. Candles burn near the altar, their flames small and upright, their scent gentle and honeyed beneath the heavier smell of incense, wool, old wood, and damp stone. Voices begin to chant. The sound is low and even, rising into the arches, returning softened. You feel the vibration in your ribs. Bees are not visible here, yet their labour glows everywhere. Every candle is a little memory of flowers. Back in the garden, the monk prepares to take honey. Medieval beekeeping with straw scapes can be harsh by modern standards. Since the comb is fixed inside, harvesting may damage or destroy the colony, unless special care or extra equipment is used. Some keepers take only part of the comb, others sacrifice weaker hives at the season's end. It is not the gentle frame-by-frame inspection of modern apiaries. The past is often beautiful, but it is not always tidy. It rarely came with humane best practice leaflets. Smoke drifts around you, smelling of dried grass and old bark. The bees slow and thicken in the air. The monk lifts the skep slightly and works with careful hands. Comb appears, pale and uneven, built according to bee logic rather than human neatness. Honey gleams in the cells. The wax tears softly. A bee crawls across your sleeve, delicate feet tickling the cloth, and you hold still with the disciplined calm of someone pretending not to be nervous. The comb goes into a wooden bowl. Its surface shines with broken gold and white wax. In the abbey kitchen, it may be crushed and strained through cloth. Honey will drip slowly into a pot, thick as syrup, smelling of orchard bloom, hedgerow flowers, and summer heat stored away. The wax will be washed, melted, cleaned, and poured into moulds or pulled into tapers. Nothing is wasted. Medieval life is very good at finding 17 uses for something modern people would accidentally leave on a counter and forget. Beyond the abbey walls, village bees live in cottage gardens, orchards, and small plots edged by wattle fences. You walk along a muddy lane where pigs root near a ditch and chickens scatter with ridiculous alarm. A woman tends skeps beside a row of beans. Her hands are red from cold water and work. A child watches from behind her skirt. Bees move through apple blossom overhead, and the whole tree seems to whisper. The smell is green, sweet, and muddy all at once. For a peasant household, honey is precious, but wax may be even more important as a saleable product. A small amount of wax can help pay dues, supply the church, or bring coin at market. Honey can sweeten ale, porridge, oat cakes, cheese, and remedies for sore throats or tired bodies. It can also disappear quickly when too many relatives visit, because no historical period has solved the problem of guests noticing the good food. You find mead in a manor hall as evening deepens. The hall is long, smoky, and warm, with rushes scattered on the floor and dogs lying close to the fire. Timber beams vanish into shadow. Men and women talk over trenchers of bread, pottage, roasted meat on fortunate days, and bowls of thick stew. A cup passes into your hand. Mead smells of honey, yeast, wood, and a faint sour brightness. It touches your tongue with sweetness first, then warmth, then the earthy depth of fermentation. Mead can be simple or elaborate, weak or strong, fresh or aged, flavoured with herbs and spices where wealth allows. It belongs to feasts, weddings, hospitality, and winter evenings when the wind claws at the shutters. In some places, ale dominates daily drinking. In others, mead holds special status. You sip again, feeling warmth spread through your chest. The fire cracks. Someone laughs too loudly. A dog sighs under the table with the weary patience of a creature who has heard every human story twice. A quirky strand of medieval bee lore hums around the hearth. Bees were often imagined as morally sensitive creatures. People claim they disliked quarrels, foul language, strong smells, and disorder in the household. Some traditions said bees must be treated with respect, even spoken to politely, because a neglected or insulted hive might sicken or fly away. It is oddly charming to picture an entire colony judging your manners from inside a basket. Bees, apparently, were tiny winged neighbours with very high standards. Scholars remain divided over how far such beliefs shaped daily beekeeping rather than simply appearing in sermons, poems, and later folklore. Written sources often come from clergy or educated elites, while the practical knowledge of rural keepers rarely reach parchment. A monk might turn bees into examples of obedience and purity. A villager might mostly care whether the swarm stayed put and produced enough wax. Between those viewpoints lies a wide, buzzing uncertainty. You see that uncertainty in illuminated manuscripts, where bees sometimes appear with strange charm. Medieval artists did not always draw insects with scientific precision. Bees might look like striped birds, armoured flies, or little decorative creatures carrying impossible dignity. In bestiaries, the hive becomes a lesson in order, labour, loyalty, and chastity, though actual bees remain far more complicated than moral allegory allows. The medieval mind loved turning nature into instruction. Nature, meanwhile, continued doing whatever it liked in the hedges. At the market, wax changes hands in small cakes and lumps. You smell wool, leather, onions, fish, smoke, damp hay, and the sharp tang of iron tools. A candlemaker tests wax with his thumb, judging colour and purity. A church official bargains with the calm persistence of someone spending institutional money very carefully. A beekeeper stands nearby, pretending not to look desperate. Coins are counted, wax is weighed. Honey may be sold in jars or comb, though its journey is risky if the lid is poor and the road rough. Sticky goods and bumpy carts are not a friendship blessed by heaven. In a castle chapel, beeswax returns as light. The chamber is small, painted, and cold at the edges. Candles stand near carved figures and embroidered cloth. Their flames tremble as people kneel. Outside, the castle is hard with stone, iron, status, and suspicion. Inside, the bees have softened the air. The wax scent is delicate, almost creamy. You can feel the contrast between human power and insect labour, between thick walls and tiny wings. Late night settles over the village. The abbey bell rings again, slower now. Rain begins, soft at first, then steadier on thatch, tile, leaf, and road. In the garden, the skeps darken with moisture under their little shelter. Bees cluster within, warm together, waiting through the weather. In the kitchen, honey rests in a covered pot. In the church, candles burn low. In the hall, the last cup of mead is drained, and voices sink towards sleep. You sit close to the embers, feeling heat on your knees and cool air at your back. The medieval world is not quiet, not simple, not sweet in every corner. It is muddy, devout, hungry, practical, and full of work. Yet bees give it a kind of golden thread. They make light for prayer, sweetness for food, wax for trade, drink for celebration, and stories for minds that see lessons in every living thing. Their hum gathers abbey garden, cottage yard, manor hall, market stall, and chapel flame into one drowsy music, steady enough to follow into the dark, You enter a kitchen in the early modern world, where the walls are soot-darkened, the floor is swept clay, and the morning light lies in a pale rectangle across a wooden table. Outside, the cartwheels creak over ruts, geese complain near a puddle, and a woman calls across the lane with news that sounds urgent, mostly because everyone is cold. The room smells of yeast, ash, onions, damp wool, and a covered jar of honey tucked safely on a shelf above the reach of small hands and greedy cousins. The honey jar is no longer the only source of sweetness people dream about. Something else has arrived with increasing force: bright, crystalline, expensive and fashionable sugar. It comes at first like a luxury from far away, a substance handled by merchants, physicians, cooks, and wealthy households. It glitters in cones and loaves, pale and hard, wrapped and guarded, scraped or broken with special tools. To many people, it seems almost magical. It can be powdered, sculpted, dissolved, preserved, and displayed. It does not carry the floral scent of honey, but it offers a clean, sharp sweetness that chefs and hosts quickly learn to admire. You stand beside a table where a cook breaks sugar from a cone with metal nippers. The sound is crisp, little cracks and snaps against the quiet kitchen. The sugar feels dry and hard between the fingers. Nothing like the slow, warm pull of honey. It leaves dust on the skin. The cook adds it to a dish meant for a fine household, perhaps preserved fruit, a spiced sauce, a medicinal syrup, or little sweetmeats arranged for display. Nearby, honey waits in its jar, darker and more fragrant. No longer the only golden actor in the play. It has competition now, and honestly, sugar has arrived with excellent public relations. A mainstream historical fact shapes this room from the late medieval into the early modern period. Cane sugar became increasingly available in Europe because of expanding trade, colonial plantations, and refining networks. It began as a costly luxury and gradually moved toward wider use, especially as production increased in Atlantic islands and the Caribbean. That widening sweetness carried a heavy human cost, tied to forced labor and brutal plantation systems. The sugar in the bowl is not innocent. It shines brightly, but the story behind it is shadowed. You leave the kitchen and enter a port city. The air is colder by the water, salted and sharp. Ropes creak against posts. Sailcloth snaps. Dock workers shout over gulls. Barrels, crates, sacks, and ceramic vessels crowd the wharf. Spices, tobacco, wine, dried fish, cloth, and sugar all move through this restless place. The smell is a rough mixture of tar, seaweed, sweat, wet wood, smoke, and molasses leaking somewhere it should not be leaking. Commerce has never smelled tidy. Sugar travels through this port as wealth in solid form. It may arrive as raw brown masses, sticky and strong-smelling, then move toward refineries where it is clarified, boiled, filtered, moulded, dried, and sold. Refined sugar becomes a status object. It appears on elite tables as subtleties, sculptures, fruits preserved in syrup, and medicines made palatable by sweetness. In some homes, sugar is locked away. You can almost hear the key turn in a cupboard, because nothing says domestic power quite like controlling dessert. Honey responds not with drama, but endurance. It remains in rural kitchens, cottage gardens, apothecaries, inns, monasteries, farms, and village markets. It is local when sugar is distant. It is familiar when sugar is fashionable. It carries the scent of nearby fields. A beekeeper can tell you where the bees have worked heather on the moor, lime trees near the road, orchard blossom, clover pasture, buckwheat field, wild herbs along a boundary hedge. Sugar is brilliant and portable, but honey is a map you can taste. You visit a country household where the roof beams are low and smoke has polished them almost black. Rain taps on the thatch. A kettle murmurs near the fire. The table is rough beneath your palms. worn smooth at the edges by generations of elbows, us knives, cups, us some tired hands. A woman stirs honey into warm ale with spices for someone chilled and coughing. Steam rises with scents of malt, sweetness, cinnamon if the house is lucky, and a bitter herb if the patient is less lucky. The cup is passed carefully, both comfort and remedy. In early modern medicine, honey continues to work hard. Apothecaries use it in syrups, electuaries, wound preparations, and mixtures that combine old inherited practice with new experiment. Sugar enters medicine too, especially in syrups and preserved drugs. But honey does not vanish. It soothes. It binds powders. It preserves. It lends body to mixtures that would otherwise taste like damp twigs with ambition. You sit in an apothecary shop where jars line the wall, each with a label, each promising help, hope, or at least a more interesting afternoon. The shop smells of dried roses, vinegar, camphor, wax, roots, citrus peel, and honey warmed slightly to blend with herbs. A mortar scrapes, a pestle thumps in a slow rhythm. The apothecary lifts a spoon, and the mixture trails into a jar in a thick, dark ribbon. Outside, hooves clatter past the door. Inside, sweetness becomes a vehicle for healing. It makes the sharp bearable and the bitter negotiable, which is honestly one of civilization's quieter achievements. A quirky early modern tidbit waits in the world of display. Wealthy banquet tables sometimes featured elaborate sugar sculptures called subtleties, castles, animals, saints, ships, fruits, coats of arms, and scenes moulded from sugar paste. Guests admired them before eating them, because apparently even dessert needed architecture. Honey could not compete with this kind of theatrical whiteness. It did not want to become a tiny edible fortress. It preferred to remain itself amber, fragrant, irregular, and slightly stubborn. Yet honey also appears in refinement and craft. Beeswax polishes furniture, seals documents, shapes candles, strengthens thread, coats cords, and helps artisans in metalwork and casting. The sweet liquid may be overshadowed in elite fashion, but the hive remains useful in practical hands. You see a craftsman warming wax near a small flame. It softens slowly, releasing a clean, sweet smell into a room otherwise full of metal filings, smoke, and old leather. He presses the wax where he needs it, shaping with thumb and knife. Bee labour becomes human technique. Historians continue to dispute how quickly ordinary households changed from honey to sugar, because account books, recipes, and trade records often preserve the habits of wealthier people better than the daily choices of the poor. A noble kitchen may show sugar everywhere on paper, while a village home still relies on honey, fruit, malt, or nothing sweet at all. The rise of sugar was real, but uneven. It moved through class, region, trade routes, and price. History rarely changes like a door slamming. More often, it seeps in like syrup under a lid. You move through a printing shop where recipe books, household manuals, medical guides, and agricultural advice begin to circulate more widely. The room smells of ink, oil, damp paper, and hot metal. Presses groan. Pages hang to dry. Recipes call for sugar in preserves, cakes, creams, and candies. Yet honey still appears in drinks, sauces, cough mixtures, and rural instructions. Written culture spreads new tastes, but it also records older ones. A printed page can make fashion travel, though it cannot make every reader rich enough to follow it. Outside the town, bees keep working without concern for global markets. You walk beside hedgerows foaming with blossom. The afternoon is warm, and the air hums with insects. Grass brushes your ankles, cool and ticklish. Clover smells green and faintly sweet beneath the sun. A beekeeper lifts a wooden cover and listens with that old, careful attention. Hives may be skeps, box hives, logs, or other regional forms. Methods vary. sometimes clever, sometimes destructive, often shaped by local custom. Bees do not care whether sugar prices have fallen. They care about weather, flowers, queens, disease, and the troubling behaviour of humans with smoke. Honey also survives in folklore. People say certain honeys heal certain complaints. They speak of bees that know when a household changes, bees that must be informed when someone dies, bees that dislike lies, bees that leave if neglected. Some customs require telling the bees about major family events. The hive becomes part of the household's emotional weather. You can picture a grieving person standing near the skeps, speaking softly into the hum. It may not be science, but it is tender, and tenderness has its own kind of truth. Now you find yourself in a colonial parlour where sugar appears in tea, preserves cakes, and polite rituals of hospitality. Porcelain cups click on saucers. A spoon rings gently against the side of a bowl. The air smells of tea leaves, polished wood, beeswax, and a fire burning low in the grate. Sugar announces refinement. It says the household is connected to trade, fashion, and empire. Honey may sit nearby, less glamorous, perhaps used for a cough, a simple cake, or a country visitor who still prefers its deeper taste. You taste both. Sugar dissolves quickly, clean and bright. Honey lingers, floral and layered, a little earthy, a little wild. Sugar is uniform when refined, eager to disappear into whatever it sweetens. Honey insists on bringing place with it. One is a crystal of commerce, the other is a liquid memory of fields. Both are sweetness, but they speak different languages. By lamplight, you walk back through the village lane. The ground is muddy. The windows glow. Somewhere, a child eats bread with honey and sticky fingers. Somewhere else, sugar is locked in a cupboard for guests important enough to deserve it. In an apothecary shop, honey waits beside herbs. In a candlemaker's room, beeswax cools in moulds. In distant plantations, sugar rises into the world with terrible speed, reshaping diets, fortunes, and suffering on a vast scale. The night deepens. Bees rest in their hives while human sweetness changes around them. Honey has lost its monopoly, not its meaning. It no longer rules every table, but it remains intimate, useful, local, medicinal, and beloved. It is the sweetness of hedgerows, kitchens, remedies, and quiet hands. Sugar may glitter in parlours and ports, but honey keeps its slower glow, carrying the scent of blossoms into ordinary rooms where people still lean toward warmth. Cough into cups, spread sweetness on bread, and trust the old golden jar on the shelf. You step into a room where the window glass is wavy, the floorboards creak under your weight, and a beam of afternoon light falls across a table crowded with lenses, papers, wax scraps, dried flowers, and a little wooden box alive with sound. The air smells of dust, ink, beeswax, lamp oil, and honey faintly warmed by the sun. Outside, horses pass on the street with a hollow clatter, but inside the room, the smaller music is more compelling, a contained humming, close and restless, as if a summer meadow has been folded into a cabinet. You lean over the table. Beneath a simple microscope, the body of a bee becomes a country of details. Fine hairs stand like tiny reeds. The wings reveal veins like thin glass roads. The legs carry brushes, hooks, and baskets. What once seemed like a small golden-brown blur now becomes a marvel of engineering. You see the bee not as a symbol, not as a rumour from a hive, but as an animal built with astonishing precision. Science has begun to open the hive, not by making it less mysterious, but by making its mysteries sharper. A mainstream historical fact belongs here in the 17th and 18th centuries. Naturalists used microscopes and careful observation to correct many old ideas about bees. They learned more about anatomy, reproduction, wax making, comb building and the organisation of the colony. The supposed king bee slowly gave way to the queen, though the shift was not instant and not tidy. People had imagined male rule inside the hive for so long that even insects had been drafted into human politics. The bees, quite rude of them, had organised things differently. You watch a naturalist lift a dead bee gently with forceps. The metal is cool and narrow between his fingers. He places the insect under the lens and bends close, breathing carefully so he does not disturb it. The room is quiet except for the faint scratch of a quill and the ticking of cooling wood in the wall. He draws what he sees: mandibles, antennae, compound eyes, jointed legs, delicate wing edges. His incline trembles slightly where his hand tires. He's trying to catch truth with a feather and soot, which is both ridiculous and beautiful. The hive outside is harder to study. You follow him into a garden where box hives stand among fruit trees. The evening is warm. Apple leaves rustle above you. Bees pass in low arcs, returning heavy with nectar and pollen. The naturalist kneels and listens. The wood of the hive feels sun-warmed beneath your palm. Inside, thousands of bodies move over comb in darkness. The scent coming from the entrance is thick and alive: honey, wax, propolis, warm insects, and the faint green smell of crushed plant resin. Observation becomes a discipline. People begin to ask patient questions. How do bees make wax? How do they build cells so neatly? Why do some bees become workers, some drones, and one queen? How does a swarm decide to leave? What guides a bee back to the hive? Each question sounds simple until you try to answer it while being surrounded by stinging creatures with no interest in your research agenda. You move into the 18th century, into the world of glass-sided hives and experimental curiosity. A hive with windows allows you to see what was once hidden. You press your face close to the glass. It is cool against your skin, slightly dusty at the edge. Behind it, bees move in layered traffic, passing food mouth to mouth, cleaning cells, tending larvae, clustering around the queen. The comb hangs like pale architecture, regular and soft at once. It is intimate, almost secretive, and yet visible. The hive becomes a living book. A quirky tidbit rises from this age of observation. François Hubert, one of the great bee researchers, was blind, working with the help of his wife, assistants, and especially his servant and collaborator François Bernens. He studied bees through careful experiments and reports. Imagine that quiet partnership. One person cannot see the hive, another describes it, and together they reveal truths that sighted observers had missed. Science, apparently, does not always arrive through the obvious doorway. Sometimes it is guided by patience, trust, and someone willing to look very closely while bees question everyone's choices. You stand near Huber's leaf hive, a design that can open like pages of a book. The wooden frames separate gently, exposing comb without destroying the whole structure. Bees crawl over the exposed wax, disturbed but still purposeful. The sound changes when the hive opens, rising into a sharper note, a warning woven through the hum. Smoke drifts lightly, smelling of dry leaves and straw. You feel warmth from the colony on your face. It is like opening a living oven full of wings. Specialists still debate whether early scientific observers truly understood bee behavior as flexible intelligence, or mostly forced what they saw into mechanical models of instinct. Some described bees as perfect little machines governed by nature. Others sensed decision, communication, and social subtlety, though they lacked the language and tools to explain it fully. The uncertainty matters because it shows how science is shaped not only by evidence, but by the imagination available at the time. You cannot easily see intelligence if you have already decided it must look like your own. The 19th century brings a practical revolution. You enter a workshop bright with shavings and the smell of pine boards, glue, wax, and iron tools. A beekeeper runs his hand across a new wooden frame, smooth along the edge, square and orderly. Movable frame hives allow comb to be lifted out for inspection while leaving the colony intact. This changes everything. Honey can be harvested more carefully, disease can be noticed, queens can be managed, colonies can be divided. Beekeeping becomes less destructive and more systematic. You watch a frame rise slowly from the hive. It comes up heavy with bees, the comb built neatly within it. Honey shines in capped cells like little sealed moons. The beekeeper's hands are steady. A veil shadows his face. Bees strike the fabric with soft ticking sounds, annoyed but mostly blocked. The cloth brushes your cheek, scratchy and warm from breath. Smoke floats low over the frames. Sunlight catches wings, and the whole hive seems to glitter for a moment. Not with treasure stolen, but with a living order being handled carefully. Another mainstream milestone rests in this wooden frame. The Reverend Lorenzo Langstroth popularized the movable frame hive in the 19th century, using the principle of bee space. The small gap bees tend to leave open rather than fill with comb or propolis. This practical insight gave keepers access to the hive without wrecking it each time. It sounds modest. A measurement of space barely wider than a finger. But human history often turns on humble gaps. Sometimes civilization advances because someone notices exactly how much room a bee prefers. Honey extraction changes as well. You enter a room where frames are uncapped with a warm knife and placed into a metal extractor. The knife slides through wax with a soft, sticky rasp. The smell rises rich and floral, filling the room until even the walls seem sweet. The extractor turns by hand, at first slowly, then faster. Honey flings from the comb against the inner wall and runs downward in golden streams. The machine creaks. The handle presses hard into your palm. Your shoulder tires. It is not effortless, but it preserves comb, letting bees refill what they have already built. For the bees, spared architecture is saved labour. For the keeper, it is a better harvest. Rarely do both sides get something useful from human equipment. So, enjoy the moment. Science keeps moving inward. You see books on bee diseases, queen rear instances, pollen, nectar flows, and plant relationships. You hear talk of foul brood, mites, nutrition, and breeding. You watch beekeepers mark queens with tiny spots of paint, inspect brood patterns, and argue about hive design with the calm intensity of people who may never agree because every apiary has its own weather. The smell of the bee yard changes through the seasons: spring blossom, summer wax, autumn smoke, winter damp wood. The hive becomes both workplace and laboratory. Researchers study how bees navigate. They test colour vision, scent memory, and the meaning of movement. In the 20th century, the dance language of honeybees becomes one of the most famous discoveries in animal behaviour. You stand beside an observation hive and watch a worker return from a food source. She moves in a pattern across the comb, vibrating, turning, repeating. Other bees touch her with antennae, reading scent and movement in darkness. It is communication through rhythm and angle, a message danced on wax. The atmosphere around the observation hive is hushed, almost reverent. The glass reflects your face faintly, layered over the bees. You hear the soft scrape of their feet, the quick tremble of wings, the deeper collective hum. A researcher notes direction, duration, response. The bee is not merely reacting, she's telling others where to go. The discovery unsettles old boundaries between human language and animal signalling. It does not make bees tiny people, which is good, because tiny people with stingers would be a terrible idea. It makes them bees, which is already remarkable enough. Modern beekeeping spreads through orchards, fields, research stations, backyards, and commercial routes. Hives are loaded onto trucks for pollination. Bees become partners in agriculture on a vast scale, helping almonds, apples, berries, cucumbers, and many other crops set fruit. The hive is no longer only a source of honey, it becomes mobile labour, biological infrastructure, a living workforce carried from bloom to bloom. You stand near stacked boxes at dawn while a truck engine idles. The air smells of diesel, cold metal, wax, and sleepy bees. It is not romantic, exactly, but it is real. Yet even with lenses, frames, experiments, and trucks, the hive keeps some privacy. You can open it, measure it, film it, map it, and still feel humbled. A queen moves through attendance. Workers choose tasks according to age, need, and circumstance. Drones drift through the colony with one dramatic purpose and very limited career diversity. Nectar becomes honey through evaporation, enzymes, and repeated handling. Wax emerges from bodies and becomes geometry. Order arises without a manager holding a clipboard, which may be the most offensive thing bees have ever done to human pride. Evening falls over the apiary. The white hive boxes turn blue in the fading light. Grass cools around your ankles. Bees return in the last low rays, landing heavily at the entrance, their legs dusted with pollen. The sound is softer now, settling inward. You smell smoke on your sleeves, honey on your fingertips, and the green breath of fields after heat. Science has opened many doors inside the hive, but not all of them. The bees remain close enough to touch, complex enough to study, and strange enough to keep wonder alive. You rest your hand on the hive cover one final time. A faint vibration passes into your palm. It is the colony speaking in its own way, not to explain itself, not to satisfy curiosity, but simply to live. Human beings have learned to see more clearly the queen, the comb, the dance, the space between frames, the hidden labour of thousands. Yet the hum still feels older than explanation. In that sound, science and mystery do not cancel each other. They settle together, warm and low, like bees clustered in the dark. You walk into a supermarket under lights so bright they seem designed to interrogate fruit. The floor is smooth beneath your shoes. The air smells faintly of cardboard, oranges, cold metal, roasted coffee from somewhere near the entrance, and the soft plastic scent of packaging. On one shelf, honey waits in neat rose clover, acacia, manuka, buckwheat, orange blossom, wildflower, forest, organic, raw, filtered, creamed, local, imported, bear-shaped, glass-jarred, squeezable, expensive enough to make you briefly question your life choices. It is strange how calm it looks. A golden wall of sweetness, labelled and priced, sitting between jam and peanut butter, as if this story has always belonged under fluorescent lamps. You pick up a jar. It is cool at first, then warms slowly in your hand. The honey inside moves only when you tilt it, thick and deliberate, catching the light in amber waves. It seems simple. Bees made this, humans collected it. You buy it. Breakfast improves. Civilization gives itself a small pat on the head. But inside that ordinary jar is an enormous modern world. There are beekeepers watching weather apps with furrowed brows. There are almond orchards in bloom, wide as pale pink seas. There are trucks carrying hives through the night. There are laboratories testing for residues, pollen origins, moisture levels, and fraud. There are farmers depending on pollination. There are gardeners planting flowers on balconies. There are scientists listening to the hive with sensors and microphones. There are children learning, sometimes with mild alarm, that honey comes from bees and not from a cheerful plastic bear. A mainstream fact stands at the centre of this modern scene. Honeybees are crucial pollinators for many crops. Though they are not the only pollinators, wild bees, butterflies, moths, fleas, beetles, birds, and bats also help flowering plants reproduce. The honeybee gets the fame, partly because it lives in managed colonies and produces a marketable sweetener, which is excellent branding if you're an insect. Yet the wider pollinator world is richer and more fragile than one famous species alone. You leave the store and step into an orchard in early spring. The air is cool and pearly. Rows of trees stretch ahead, every branch crowded with blossoms. The smell is delicate, green, and floral, with a faint dampness from the soil. Bees move among the flowers, touching one bloom, then another, dusted with pale pollen. Their wings make a soft, dry tremble close to your ear. The petals brush your sleeve like thin paper. Somewhere nearby, a tractor turns slowly, its engine low and steady, a reminder that agriculture is both living process and machinery. The hives sit stacked at the edge of the field, white boxes under the pale sky. A beekeeper opens one, and warm hive air rises, smelling of wax, nectar, propolis, smoke, and the crowded heat of living bodies. Bees crawl all over the frames in flowing patterns. Some carry pollen packed into their leg baskets like tiny yellow saddlebags. Others fan their wings at the entrance, helping regulate temperature and moisture. The colony is not a machine. Though modern agriculture often asks it to behave like one, it is a society of instincts, signals, adjustments, and constant labour. Modern pollination can be demanding. Colonies may be moved across long distances to meet the bloom of the different crops. A hive that rests among wildflowers one month may be loaded onto a truck and carried to orchards the next. At night, when bees are inside, boxes are secured, lifted, stacked, and driven away under highway lights. You stand near one of these trucks and feel the vibration in your feet. The air smells of diesel, wood, straps, dust, and faint honey. Inside the boxes, thousands of bees hum in darkness. Passengers in an agricultural migration they didn't personally book. The world asks much of bees. Parasites such as varroa mites weaken colonies. Diseases spread. Pesticide exposure can harm bees directly or subtly affect navigation and survival. Habitat loss removes the diverse flowers that nourish them. Climate change shifts blooming times, brings heat stress, drought, storms, and strange seasons that confuse old rhythms. Poor nutrition makes colonies vulnerable. No single trouble explains every loss. The hive faces a crowd of pressures, which is a very modern kind of problem, not one villain with a cape, but a committee of complications. Researchers and agricultural historians still argue whether the modern bee crisis should be understood mainly as a biological emergency, an industrial farming problem, a land use problem, or a warning about the broader fragility of food systems. The honest answer may be uncomfortable because it refuses to stay in one tidy box. Bees live where ecology, commerce, weather, chemistry, disease, and human appetite overlap. Their troubles are not separate from ours. They are simply smaller, winged, and easier to ignore until the blossoms go quiet. You step into a city garden on a warm afternoon. Traffic murmurs beyond the fence. The air smells of tomato leaves, damp compost, basil, brick warmed by sun, and a surprising sweetness from flowers in raised beds. A hive stands on a rooftop above you, painted blue and white. Urban beekeeping has become fashionable in many places, sometimes useful, sometimes complicated, sometimes performed with a slightly smug joy of someone who owns both linen trousers and a smoker. Still, the impulse is tender. People want to be near living sweetness again. On rooftops, bees may gather nectar from parks, street trees, balcony herbs, weeds in vacant lots, and flowers planted by people who had no idea they were feeding a city hive. The honey can taste unexpectedly complex. Lime trees to chestnut, clover, garden flowers, and unknown blossoms blend into a flavour map of the neighbourhood. You taste a spoonful offered by the beekeeper. It is bright, herbal, and faintly minty. Below, buses sigh at stops. Above, bees cross between buildings like golden thoughts. A quirky modern tidbit belongs to honey's identity as a detective story. Pollen grains in honey can reveal where bees foraged, because pollen has distinctive shapes under a microscope. Some scientists and food investigators use pollen analysis, chemistry, and other tests to study honey origins and detect adulteration. So the jar on a shelf may carry hidden evidence, a floral fingerprint suspended in sweetness. Honey, apparently, has been keeping receipts. Fraud is part of the modern honey story too. Some products sold as honey may be diluted or blended with syrups in ways that are difficult for shoppers to detect. The demand for cheap sweetness invites shortcuts. Real honey takes land, flowers, healthy bees, labour, time, and careful handling. Fake or adulterated honey takes opportunity and a disappointing lack of shame. This is why some buyers seek trusted local beekeepers, cooperatives, or producers with transparent practices. Trust, like honey, is slow to make and easy to spill. You enter a small honey house at harvest time. The room is warm, and every surface seems touched by amber light. Frames stand in stacks. A heated knife removes wax cappings with a soft sighing scrape. The smell is almost overwhelming: fresh honey, wax, summer flowers, wood, and a little smoke clinging to clothing. Bees tap against a window, confused by the scent. The extractor turns, humming and clicking. Honey runs from a spout into a bucket in a shining ribbon. You watch bubbles rise slowly through it, patient as moons. The beekeeper dips a spoon and lets you taste the season. This honey is darker than the jar from the store. It tastes of late summer, sun on dry grass, wild flowers, and something almost caramel-like at the edge. Another batch from another place might be pale, light, and floral. Another might be deep and bitter, powerful enough to make toast feel like a serious philosophical event. Artisan honey reminds you that bees do not make one flavour. They translate landscapes. In hospitals and clinics, medical-grade honey has found a place again in certain wound care settings, carefully sterilised and prepared for safe use. This is not the same as grabbing a breakfast jar and making bold decisions in the bathroom mirror. Please do not let history make you overconfident. But it is remarkable that modern medicine has returned, under controlled conditions, to a substance people trusted across many centuries. Science strips away exaggeration, tests effects, refines use, and sometimes discovers that an old remedy had a real foundation beneath the folklore. Honey also lives in culture as comfort. It goes into tea when your throat aches. It drizzles over yogurt. It shines on roasted carrots, glazes nuts, sweetens bread, softens sharp cheese, and turns plain toast into something quietly luxurious. In kitchens across the world, it is both ancient and ordinary. You twist open a jar at night, and the lid gives a small sticky pop. The scent rises, floral and warm. A spoon enters slowly, for all the complexity behind it. The act remains simple. You lift sweetness from a jar and let it touch your tongue. Outside, the future of honey depends on choices that seem humble but add up. More flowering habitat, fewer unnecessary chemicals, better disease management, respect for wild pollinators as well as managed honeybees, diverse farms, gardens that bloom across seasons, research that listens closely, markets that reward honest honey, beekeepers who are supported rather than squeezed, consumers who understand that the cheapest sweetness may hide costs paid elsewhere. The evening settles around you in a small garden. Flowers close their faces. The air cools against your skin. A hive rests beneath a fruit tree, its entrance still busy with the last returning workers. Their wings brush the dusk with tiny sounds. You smell damp soil, leaves, wax, and the faint sweetness of nectar not yet turned fully into honey. The colony gathers inward. The queen moves somewhere in the dark. Workers share food, clean cells, warm brood, seal honey, and maintain the living centre. You sit quietly and listen. The hum is low, steady, and layered. It has followed humanity across cliffs, villages, temples, kitchens, ships, laboratories, farms, markets, and city roofs. Yet it does not belong to us. That is the gentle lesson. Honey is a gift made by creatures with their own needs, their own rhythms, and their own delicate place in the world. You may hold the jar, but you do not own the miracle. The garden darkens. The last bee slips inside. A small golden line of light remains on the hive entrance, then fades. You breathe slowly. The sweetness on your tongue becomes memory, and memory becomes calm. The world is still uncertain, but not empty. Flowers will open, bees will search, hands will plant, tend, harvest, and learn. Somewhere, a spoon will turn in warm tea. Somewhere, a child will taste honey and grow quiet with surprise. The hum softens into the night, carrying a promise as fragile as wings and as old as human wonder. Let your shoulders loosen now. Let the day fall away like petals settling on dark water. The hive is closed. The garden is still, and the moon lays a pale path across leaves that barely move. You do not need to follow every thought. You can let them drift, one by one, like bees returning through twilight with the last gold of evening held safely inside them. The jar is sealed. The spoon is resting. The flowers sleep in their own soft language. In the quiet, sweetness remains, not bright or demanding, but deep, warm, and gentle, gathered from countless small journeys and offered back to the dark. Breathe in, breathe out. The hum is fading now, lower and farther away, until it becomes only peace, and then almost nothing at all.